They told men a lie so often it became law, that without a relationship a man is incomplete, that his worth is measured by how much he sacrifices. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people weren't ready for. Men didn't suddenly become cold. They woke up, and what shocked everyone wasn't anger. It was relief. In dark psychology, there's a concept called negative reinforcement bonding. You stay not because you're happy, but because leaving feels worse. Constant criticism, walking on eggshells, proving your value every single day. So men asked a dangerous question: what happens if I stop playing? And when they stepped into solitude, something unexpected happened. The anxiety dropped. The guilt disappeared. The constant self-doubt went silent. Peace replaced performance. And that's when the real panic started, not in men, but in the people who assumed men had no standards. Because once a man tastes peace, he becomes very hard to control. Here's what dark psychology teaches about control. The moment someone realizes they don't need you, your leverage vanishes. For years, men were conditioned to believe loneliness was the worst possible outcome, that being alone meant failure. So they tolerated disrespect just to avoid it. But solitude exposed the trick. Men discovered something terrifying to the system. Being alone didn't hurt. Being with the wrong person did. No more emotional audits. No more defending hobbies like they were crimes. No more explaining exhaustion after long days. And here's the twist most didn't expect. Without constant criticism, men became calmer. Without pressure, they became sharper. Without chaos, they became attractive to themselves. Dark psychology calls this identity reclamation. When external validation is removed, internal authority returns. And that's when the narrative collapsed. Because men who don't seek approval can't be manipulated by withholding it. Which raises a dangerous question no one wants to ask. If men are happier alone, what does that say about the relationships they left? There's a psychological phenomenon called reward inversion. It happens when effort is punished instead of appreciated. Many men lived inside this loop for years. The more they gave, the less it mattered. The more they tried, the more was expected. Over time, their nervous systems adapted, not to love, but to survival. Silence became safer than honesty. Compliance felt easier than conflict. And slowly, the man disappeared. Then something snapped. Men began noticing a pattern. The moment they stopped overgiving, the moment they stopped explaining themselves, the moment they stopped apologizing for existing, the tension shifted. But instead of respect increasing, resentment appeared. Because the system wasn't built for balance. It was built for extraction. Dark psychology calls this entitlement conditioning, when one side is trained to receive without reciprocating. And when the supply ends, confusion turns into anger. That's why the shock wasn't that men left. It was that they left without begging. Here's the part nobody prepared for. When men left, they didn't collapse. They improved. Dark psychology explains this as stress removal rebound. When chronic emotional stress disappears, the body heals fast. Men slept deeper, thought clearer, laughed more. Some lost weight without trying. Others gained muscle just from having energy again. Their faces changed. Their posture changed. And this created an uncomfortable contradiction. Weren't men supposed to suffer without relationships? Instead, they were thriving. Without someone monitoring their moods. Without defending their ambitions. Without guilt attached to rest. And here's the dangerous realization that followed. The relationship wasn't making them better. It was making them smaller. So when former partners noticed the glow-up, confusion turned into disbelief. How are you happier without me? But dark psychology is clear. People don't miss you when you leave. They miss the control they lost. And when that control is gone, the narrative flips from "you need me" to "why aren't you coming back?" This is where the power shift becomes irreversible. Because happiness without permission is threatening. In dark psychology, independence removes compliance. A man who doesn't need validation can't be steered by guilt. Men began rebuilding quietly. Careers advanced without constant interruptions. Money stayed where it was earned. Time belonged to them again, and something else returned. Self-respect. Not the loud kind, the dangerous kind. The kind that doesn't argue, doesn't explain, doesn't chase closure. And this exposed a brutal truth. Many relationships survived not on love, but on fear of loneliness. Once that fear vanished, the structure collapsed. Men realized they had been negotiating for basic decency, asking to be spoken to respectfully, defending the right to rest. Dark psychology calls this normalized disrespect. When mistreatment feels ordinary because it's constant, leaving didn't feel like loss. It felt like waking up. Here's the illusion that finally shattered, that men are afraid of being alone. Dark psychology reveals something different. Men fear chaos, not solitude. Once men experience days without criticism, weeks without emotional ambushes, months without walking on eggshells, their nervous systems recalibrated. Silence stopped feeling empty. It felt safe, and safety is addictive. This is why going back became impossible. Not because of pride, because the body remembers peace. Men noticed how much energy relationships consumed, explaining, reassuring, managing. Emotions that weren't theirs. Single life didn't feel lonely. It felt efficient. Focus increased. Creativity returned. Friendships deepened without jealousy attached. And here's the uncomfortable part. Some men realized they had felt lonelier in relationships than they ever felt alone. Dark psychology calls this emotional isolation inside proximity, being near someone who makes you feel unseen. Once a man recognizes that feeling, he refuses to experience it again. This is where the accusations begin, because when control fails, shame is deployed. You're afraid of commitment. You'll die alone. You're bitter. Dark psychology calls this social punishment scripting. If a man won't comply, label him defective. But here's the problem. Those words only work on men who still doubt themselves. These men don't. They've tasted a life without constant judgment, without emotional debt, without proving their worth daily. And here's the twist. Men didn't leave to punish anyone. They left to protect themselves. The shame doesn't land because peace feels better than approval. And something else changed. Men stopped explaining their choices. A man who justifies himself still seeks permission. A man who stays silent has already decided. Dark psychology shows that the strongest position is not arguing your value. It's living as if it's already proven. And when men stopped defending their decision to stay single, the panic intensified. Because silence can't be debated. Now we reach the part nobody wants to say out loud. Respect doesn't come from sacrifice. It comes from boundaries. Dark psychology exposes a harsh rule. People value what can walk away. Men who stayed through everything were never respected more. They were respected less. Because tolerance of disrespect signals permission. When men started enforcing limits, not yelling, not threatening, just leaving, the dynamic shattered. Here's the irony. Many partners only recognized a man's value after he was gone. Not because love suddenly appeared, but because access disappeared. Scarcity creates reflection. Men learned that chasing affection kills attraction. Overgiving erodes desire. Endless compromise destroys polarity. So single men didn't become colder. They became selective. And that selectivity raised the bar permanently. Because once a man knows he's happier alone, any relationship must compete with peace. And most don't. This is the long-term consequence no one predicted. Men didn't just leave relationships, they redesigned their lives. Dark psychology calls this identity recentering. When external approval is removed, internal purpose takes over. Men invested in skills instead of arguments, health instead of appeasement, growth instead of guilt. Money stopped leaking into emotional damage control. Time stopped being negotiated. Energy went into creation, not conflict. And something unexpected happened. Men became happier without trying to be. Not chasing happiness, not optimizing attraction, just living. And this triggered a cultural shock. The gender expected to suffer in solitude was thriving. Meanwhile, those who relied on constant validation felt the absence immediately. Because attention is only abundant when someone is willing to give it freely. Men withdrawing attention wasn't revenge. It was self-respect. And once men stopped auditioning for acceptance, the entire dating dynamic shifted. But there's one final realization that seals everything. Men didn't abandon love. They abandoned imbalanced exchange. They didn't reject relationships. They rejected being the only one carrying them. For the first time, men asked a forbidden question: does this add to my life or subtract from it? And if the answer was chaos, criticism, or control, they chose peace. That choice shocked people who assumed men had no standards, no limits, no exit strategy. But men learned something irreversible. Peace is not loneliness. Solitude is not failure. And happiness doesn't require permission. A relationship is no longer the goal. It's the bonus, only if it improves what already exists. So when people ask why men are happier staying single, the answer is simple and terrifying. They finally chose themselves. Now I want to hear from you. What made you value peace over partnership? What changed when you stopped explaining your worth? Drop your experience below, because choosing happiness isn't quitting. It's waking up,